Good morning, Life University, and welcome to Spring Quarter 2020, Week 2 Assembly. I'm Dr. Joe Lamarche, Vice President of University Advancement and your Assembly Coordinator. And normally we love to recognize our first quarter students and have you stand up at your first assembly. We're unable to do that, but rest assured that the first time we get together live, we certainly will recognize you. So a special welcome to our first quarter students. It's a great pleasure for me this morning to introduce our assembly speaker, Life University's Chancellor Emeritus, Dr. Guy Riekeman. Dr. Guy, it's all up to you now.
Jill, thank you. I would like to tell everyone that we're having a brutal lockdown here in Puerto Rico, which is one of the first and one of those toughest states to enact a lockdown. But as I'm standing here doing this, I'm looking out to my left, out my living room windows, watching the water slap up against the house down here on the beach. So, we're all hunkered down, and there are pluses and minuses. And I think that's sort of the message that's what's going on today. I talk to a lot of people on one end of the scale. You have these people that just say, follow the orders, hunker down. We've got to reduce the spike on this CV-19 curve. And on the other end, I'm reading stuff with people that are more conspiratorial in nature, talking about this is the setup for mass vaccination of the entire species. It's a plot by medicine and government to take our civil liberties away. I know people that are actually arming their houses in anticipation of a great revolt. So, and I think probably somewhere in between those two extremes is where reality is. I see on one hand, people just sort of accepting that all of our politicians are concerned, that media is, just there to support us and make sure we have the information, that our medical docs are doing the best they can. And I see people applauding in Atlanta, New York. They come out on their stoops and their terraces and applaud appropriately. Then on the other end, there are people, and I've gone through some of this myself, that are really angry about the fact that we have other crises going on in the healthcare system that are of equal nature, if not greater nature, as far as number of people that are affected every year, and yet there doesn't seem to be too much concern about those kinds of issues. So again, I think what we want to do today is talk a little bit about perspective. I think maybe the easiest way, and it's so appropriate here, is to put what's going on and what I think we need to do for the future in the context of the pyramid of healthcare: initial intensive care, corrective care, and wellness development care. Obviously, as a metaphor, on the scale of what's going on culturally right now, we're in initial intensive care. So when you're in initial intensive care, all your other issues sort of get set aside, including even things like employment right now, as far as the society is concerned. And like any initial intensive care, if I was in an automobile accident and I'm laying by the side of the road and I've got a severed artery, and every time my heart beats, I'm spurting out blood and I'm going to die in a handful of minutes. I've always joked, but it's true, don't run up to me and give me nutritional advice in that moment. I'm not available to hear it in that particular moment. So I think today, with what's going on, while we have a great message in chiropractic about health and prevention and wellness and these kinds of issues, there's just no listening available for most of society right now. So instead of getting mad about that, what we need to be doing is planning. And there are really two options available to us. One is, and a lot of my friends are doing this, chiropractors are just hunkering down, trying to weather the storm and waiting for things to get back to normal. My message to them would be, we're never going to go back to what normal was before. There's going to be a new normal once we come out of this. So whatever you think normal was before, it's going to be less than that. So we can either hunker down, wait for things to happen, almost as victims, and when we come out of this, hope that we can survive in the new normal. The other is a more proactive approach, which is in times of disruptive innovation, which is what we're in right now, that in these moments in time, these are when millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires are made. This was the age of when the internet was being introduced. The Jobs and the Gates and the Bezos, who were there quietly working out of their garages initially, and all of a sudden they are who they are today in today's world. And so as chiropractors and as chiropractic as a profession, We can either hunker down, wait for this to blow over and hope that we get some piece of the pie when it comes back, or we can be putting things in place in this moment of disruptive innovation. And I'm going to talk about, when I close today, where I think that opening is, what I think is possible, and how we can take advantage of this to move our practices and our profession forward in meaningful ways. So just some facts and perspective as we get started with this. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the head of the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, tells us that we should estimate somewhere between 100 and 200,000 deaths in the United States. For this discussion, statistically, I'll just take the average. Let's assume there's going to be 150,000 deaths due to the coronavirus. If we also recognize that there are 327 million Americans, US citizens, for mathematical purposes, and I'm just going to use 325. And while all deaths are a tragedy, you get down to an individual death, it is extremely tragic. I lived through that with my daughter, who died at the hands of a couple of arrogant MDs that did some procedures on her without our permission. In fact, against what we told them to do, and it cost my 20-year-old daughter her life. The US government says there's 100 to 300,000 of those deaths each year that are covered up. So, you know, while we want to talk about preventable issues, I think that while individual deaths are tragic, we also need to have some perspective on the overall problem. For example, deaths due to prescriptive drugs. There's 136,000 deaths, not one time, not as a spike, not because a new thing has happened, 136,000 deaths each and every year. And yet, you know what? It's not getting any media attention. It's not taking away our civil liberties. Of course, we know the opioid crisis, which had a blip of media experience. There are 50,000 deaths each year. And this, of course, was a preventable, it was a manufactured crisis that was actually exploited by the pharmaceutical industry. And we know that the majority of those people started off with neck and back pain. And that, in fact, if the medical community would be open and work together with chiropractors in a meaningful way of referral and relationship, we probably could have avoided most of this problem, if not all of it. And then Harvey Rosenfield, in his book, Silent Violence, Silent Death, tells us that there are about 80 to 150,000 medical malpractice deaths every single year. So if I start putting that in perspective of how, what the rate is or ratio is per 100,000, with the coronavirus, there's going to be 4.6 people out of every 100,000 that die because of coronavirus. There's going to be 4.2 people that die each year out of every 100,000 from prescriptive drugs. 1.5 out of every 100,000 people due to opioids and medical malpractice. 2.5 to 4.5 deaths every 100,000 every year. Then you start looking at some other issues that are more lifestyle issues, like diabetes, for example. Forget the idea of 100 to 200,000 deaths a year. Diabetes and related conditions result in 1.6 million people each year dying because of simple lifestyle issues that they could change literally overnight. We know, for example, that if people would eat more fatty fish, add some leafy vegetables to their diet, and get out and walk for 30 minutes every day, the estimate is that 80 to 90% of all diabetic issues would clean up. You know, I would question, in my sometimes cynical view of healthcare, why aren't we quarantining people and taking the civil liberties away of people that don't do these things because of what they're costing the United States population? But I recognize, going back to our triangle, that we're dealing with an initial intensive care problem, and what I'm talking about here are the long-term corrective changes that we're going to have to make to this society, regardless of the idea that eventually we need to talk about how to really create a well society. And of course, chiropractic is much more focused on corrective care and much more appropriate for wellness care than some of these other issues. My last comment, just perspective-wise, would be, if you want to know why things are the way they are, always follow the money. And 70% of all dollars spent for advertising comes on our major networks is supplied by the pharmaceutical industry. And while any media outlet might tell you that they're immune to the influences of their advertisers, I would probably argue that. And when someone's giving you 70% of your money and your ability to survive, you might be available to be hushed up or at least quieted on certain individual topics. So within all of that, right, and the dilemma that we're all facing and the changes that this has created for us, what's going on in chiropractic today? And I want to introduce one of my best friends, Dr. Stu Bernsen, who also is one of the most visionary and influential and forward-thinking chiropractors that has been putting hundreds of chiropractors into practice in their Chiro One franchise. And they have, more than any other group that I know of, created an environment where students can come out, join a practice, and instead of being used as slave labor and barely getting by, can build fabulous lifestyles and be part of a group having tremendous impact. And so I've asked Stu to come on and join us a bit, talk a little bit about what he's finding out that's going on in the chiropractic community by letting us know what his docs are experiencing, some of the things they're doing to prepare for the future. And more importantly, instead of hunkering down, I think you're going to see in Stu's comments that in fact, we can begin to build up a backlog of people that want to come in for chiropractic care so that when this thing finally breaks, chiropractic will flourish and move forward even bigger than what our old normal happened to be. So I guess the overall message I'm hoping is that it's a good time to be a student. Stu, thanks for joining us. And I think you're in Chicago, right?
I'd rather be back home in Puerto Rico with you.
2 blocks from home, right?
Right. We'll be back next week.
Tell us what's going on in your offices.
Yeah. We started, I've spoken with dozens and dozens of chiropractors in the last week and a half in reaching out and seeing what's going on in the field and getting a pulse of what's going on. And it's really a mixed bag. Some docs have pulled back and closed their offices and, you know, are fearful of not being able to survive. And some docs are moving forward and putting their foot on the accelerator. We, as a company, have always started with our why, and whenever we are struck with some kind of adversity, we go back to why we're doing what we're doing. And we create a very large why. So the how-to comes by itself. So we're looking at, you know, influencing our doctors to influence their patients and prepare and set the groundwork for when all the chaos starts to settle, that just what you said, their ears are going to be peaked up to see what they could do proactively. Right now, it is a crisis scenario, but there is an interesting thing that's happening in our offices. Every single day, we're hearing from patients, thank God you're open. This is one of the only places that I feel safe going to. Now, think about that. These people right now on these mandatory shut-ins have a lot of time, right? And they now are choosing to go and get adjusted. 1, because they have time. 2, they've made it a family outing. And 3, it's a safe place for them to go and do something they know is going to support them. Now, there are a few things that I've recognized in speaking with doctors both inside of our practice and outside, that if you have taken the time to communicate effectively all 3 stages of care, and you have focused on the chiropractic message and trained your patients and your teams on chiropractic is part of a wellness lifestyle, those practices, although their volumes may be down, they're not nearly as down as those practices that only focus on acute care. And it's amazing to see the difference between the style of practice. Now, no judgment there, but we're using it within our 70 offices. We even have this going on where some volumes have only dropped 5-10%, and other volumes have dropped 50%. And we're using this as feedback as to how well trained our teams are in communicating the chiropractic message. And actually having these teams now reach back out and retrain their patients. And as you said, with great adversity comes great opportunity. I've been practicing for 28 years now, and every year I always chuckle that it's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. Right. And right now, it's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. Like, we have such an opportunity to make lemonade and make lots of lemonade.
What are some of the things that you're actually instructing your docs to do? Like, what kind of things have you instituted since this has happened that didn't exist before?
Sure. So we've been talking about telemedicine and telehealth programs for over 1.5 to 2 years, and it's seemed always to be kind of a back burner project, and we didn't really see a way to implement it. I sat down with my team a week ago Monday and asked them to come up with 2 different strategies to help serve our patients while they're at home. And this was one of the strategies. We actually, kudos to the team, actually implemented a telehealth program in less than 4 days from concept to launch. And so now our doctors have a way to reach out to patients and communicate with them and meet them where they're at. So if they are fearful of leaving and coming out of their houses and going into the public, they have a resource where they could actually be in touch with their chiropractor and do a check. And it's also a way for us to reach out to new patients that have a need. Like, if you're musculoskeletal based practice, or the vast majority of patients, which is true for our practices, come because they initially have a problem before they discover the chiropractic lifestyle, those things didn't go away because coronavirus came. Right. All these patients still have a chiropractic need. And so we're kind of bridging that gap. This telehealth is bridging the gap or the fear in a very non-invasive manner to be introduced to chiropractic. It's actually something that we're going to carry on and expand on and grow as we come out of this, where patients could get over that initial hurdle of leaving their door and entering our doors. I always say, like, one of the hardest things about exercising daily is literally just getting out of the door. Once you're out the door and on the beach walking, it's a piece of cake. Right. Once you're out the door and you enter the gym, it's a piece of cake. But it's that initial inertia that you have to overcome. And I think this telehealth program is one of those initial things that breaks the inertia, where a patient could go, oh, I could do this from my desk at work. I could do this from my couch at home and see if this chiropractic thing is the right place for me.
One of the, I've had the same experience talking to chiropractors. Those that are down, and I'll be extreme, are those that just have lived on PI practices.
Yes.
Right. I would guess that there are less automobile accidents actually going on right now, statistically. But the practices have been based on philosophy, which leads to education, as you pointed out, and based on relationships, which is what our philosophy does. It helps us build lifetime relationships with patients. Those practices, you say, are affected less by what's going on. I have another question. I'm working a little bit with a chiropractor in Atlanta doing some coaching. And one of the things that we instituted were Zoom meetings just like this. So he's now contacting patients on specific topics like kids and their immune system. And then he limits the audience to 25 people on his Zoom. But they're also inviting friends, not to their house, but on the Zoom call, more than he's ever had contact with those kinds of people before. He did one the other day on, as a mom, you can't afford to be sick right now, right? And so it was about that. And they invited other moms to listen. So while they're not running out of their homes right now to come in as new patients, that's slowed down to a large degree. What he's doing is building a backlog of new patients that the day, as you said, this chaos begins to end, they're going to flood in. And like you pointed out, it was an interesting point. I think when this is all said and done, that's going to be his main new patient accrual system versus going back to all sorts of other expensive kind of things.
Yeah, and as you know, we have a pretty substantial marketing machine. We have a lot of people. What we do isn't really unique as far as the activities of doing talks and screenings. We just do it on a massive scale. So for years, we do around 1,000 to 1,200 events every single month. That came to a screeching halt March 15th. And so we had 60 plus people on our marketing team that we had to figure out how do we still keep them employed and engaging our communities, because that's what they are. They're customer engagement reps. And that's some of the strategies that we've gone to, is creating virtual events for us to execute and continue to educate people. And it's never been a better time to do that because people have the time right now.
Yeah.
And they're ready to hear it. They don't know what to do. And there's been so much focus on the virus where we're redirecting the focus on the host, right? Let's build the health of the host versus being scared of the virus.
Absolutely. Everybody's going to encounter the virus sooner or later.
That's right.
Right? It's what's going on with the host. In fact, that's probably a good place for me to transition to the next person that I brought on. I know that the WFC put out a note and said, do not talk to your patients about chiropractic's impact on their immune system. And yet we know that this is a neuroimmune problem. It's, more than anything. So Stu, thank you. We appreciate what you're doing, and I'll keep your house checked up while you're out of the country.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. The next person that I want to have talk about this is, there are a few people in our profession that have the ability to take science and put it together in meaningful ways. And one of the people who I've known for a long, long time, she was actually a student of mine when I was at Palmer back in the day. So that would have been in the right around the year, 1998, somewhere in there. She was also excelling at the time. She was a Vote Leadership Society member, which was starting in 5th through 10th quarter at Palmer. The class voted 2 people out of each of their classes that they felt were going to be leaders in the profession over the course of their lifetime. And so these 10 people, 2 from each of the last 5 classes, were scholarshiped through what was known as the Vote Leadership Society. And Monique was one of those individuals. And then for the last, she's going to tell me how many years in a moment, has been teaching at Life West and is now back in Vancouver with her partner, one of my good friends, Tamara. And together they are rocking it for chiropractic. And so one of the things I asked Monique to come on and talk about today was, does chiropractic really have a role in immune response of individuals, regardless of what the World Federation is telling us? Monique Andrews. Monique, thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much. Good morning, Life. And Guy, thanks for inviting me to be with you today. I'm really pleased to share a little bit about chiropractic and the immune system with you all.
Great.
So I guess first I probably should get my bias out of the way. And that is to say that for me, I mean, I think we would all agree that chiropractic is about supporting the body's function rather than treating any specific symptom or pathology. So to be clear for me, chiropractic is not about treatment for any infectious disease. Chiropractic care is really a unique salutogenic approach, and that the primary focus is on enhancing the body's ability to self-regulate, to self-maintain, and to heal itself, to optimize potential. And we do that through correcting subluxation, and the purpose is to enhance nervous system function. So I just want to be really clear about that. Now, if we think about research to date and neurological research, there's one thing that we know for certain, and that is when you adjust somebody, you impact the brain function. Now, when we look at the research on chiropractic and immunity, there's been some debate recently with the statement that came out from WFC up here in Canada. There was some lashback or kickback from our licensing bodies on chiropractors making statements about chiropractic boosting the immune system. Now, what I want to explain to you today is what we can say about chiropractic and immunity, and probably what not to say. You know, right off the top, coming out and saying that chiropractic boosts immunity is probably not a good thing to say, because it's erroneous in its statement. And that is, number one, it doesn't boost immunity. Is it very likely that it has an impact on immunity? Yes. And I'll talk about a few studies today that outline that. Does it boost it? We don't really want to say that, because what if, for example, you have an autoimmune disease? Then, you know, do those people not want chiropractic because they don't want their immune systems boosted? So the language that we use becomes really important. And so I want to explain to you today, number one, some of the studies and reasons why we can say that chiropractic impacts immune system and how our bodies adapt to challenge. And number two, what's the best way to translate and convey that message to patients while still maintaining integrity from a scientific perspective. So there's a small but promising body of research on chiropractic and immunity. And, probably there's about a couple of dozen studies that show that when you have chiropractic care, it may influence and impact our body's immune system and ability to adapt to challenge. Now, I say may influence. Words are really important. And because we don't want to make causative statements from correlative data. Now, it's okay to say that the brain impacts the immune system and that having chiropractic care may have a positive influence on your body's immunity. That's an okay statement, okay? Let me go through some of the other data with you so that you feel comfortable and confident in what you maybe are conveying to people. Now, as a student, some of you are seeing patients at this time, and some of you probably are confused by scrolling through social media and all the different things that you see. And so I want to tell you a little bit about what is out there. And probably I'll start by telling you just a little review of your anatomy. Number one, we know that the brain controls every cell, organ, and tissue in your body. That includes your immune system. Now, up until about 3 years ago, we didn't even really think that the brain had an immune system or that the immune system was in the brain. We now know that that's different. And in fact, we know there's a bi-directional communication between your brain and your immune system. We used to think that the brain's job was to run the body and the immune system's job was to protect it. We now know that they work together and there's an incredible interplay. Hey, if I start to get too, if I get too nerded out, you let me know, Guy.
I will. Not even close.
Okay, good. So we also know that the autonomic nervous system plays a critical role in neuroimmune interactions. Now, we've been saying for a long time, and we have data to support that when you're subluxated, it impacts the autonomic nervous system. And in fact, it increases our sympathetic tone. So when you're subluxated, it impacts the brain and it impacts the autonomic nervous system. And for certain, there is no question that the autonomic nervous system impacts the immune system. Then of course there's a relationship. At this point, we don't have a lot of causative clinical data, but we have a good deal of basic science research that we can lean on to at least lend some evidence toward, chiropractic care impacting immunity. And there's been several studies that look at immune markers like interleukin-2, CD4, tumor necrosis factors. And in all of these cases, it suggests that chiropractic care actually influences the biological immune response. Okay? Should I go through a few of the studies?
Yes.
All right. So in 2008, there was a great study. I'm not going to try and say the author's name because I'll butcher it, but it's from Chiropractic and Manual Therapies. And what they did was they looked at interleukin-2 response with a single chiropractic adjustment. Okay. Now, interleukin-2 really are key players. Think about them as being key players in your body's army of immune cells. And what they found, of course, is that there was a positive change in interleukin-2 with one adjustment. Now, this has been echoed in neurological studies showing the impact of the chiropractic adjustment on metabolic change in the brain, on salivary amylase, on all kinds of other qualitative assessments like quality of life, stress index. So we know that there's this impact, right? So that's the interleukin study that you probably have seen floating around the internet. There's also a study that looks at CD4. Now, what is CD4? They basically are the immune system's helper cells. And what they do is they send signals to all kinds of other cells in your immune system to destroy infection. Now, the study that it was by Solano. It's called The Effects of Specific Upper Cervical Adjustments on CD4 Counts, and it was done in HIV patients. And what they found is that, and they did this is a 6-month study, in that these HIV patients that were under consistent chiropractic care for 6 months showed an increase in CD4, which is a positive thing, by 48%. 48%. Now, in the control group, the change was only about 8%. So there's a massive indication that when you have consistent chiropractic care, you are influencing the immune system in a very positive way. And in fact, showing an augmentation or enhancement in immune response. This is very positive. Several other studies looking at all sorts of immune biomarkers. Now, again, these are more correlative than causative. So we have to be mindful of the statements that we make. Those 2 studies are the ones that are really the closest we can get to that definitive statement of saying that we are positively impacting immunity. There's also been osteopathic studies. They have done more clinical studies on the effect of osteopathic manipulation on the immune system than there have been in chiropractic that are more clinically oriented. And while osteopathy and chiropractic aren't the same, there's a similar application, right? And so they did a study on the effect of osteopathy on pneumonia with very positive results. So these are all extremely encouraging and allowing us to sort of say, you know, chiropractic care can influence what's happening with immune system response. And this is a critical factor right now at this time in this crisis, right? Yeah.
Does if you were talking to a chiropractor and telling them, look, what should I tell my patient? What would that look like?
This is what I would say, and I'm not in practice right now. And I couldn't say this when I was in practice 20 years ago because it wasn't the case. Here's what we know for certain. Your brain controls every cell, organ, and tissue in your body. That includes your immune system. And being under chiropractic care may influence your body's ability to adapt to stress and improve the function of your immune system. And that is a claim that we can make that's true. Where we're getting in trouble is chiropractors are posting things on social media saying chiropractic boosts the immune system. Don't say that, because while we're close to knowing definitively through the science that chiropractic impacts the immune system in a positive way, we shouldn't say it boosts immunity. And number one, we don't have the clinical data to support that. And number two, well, it's just like going out there and saying that chiropractic that chiropractic decreases blood pressure. Well, what if you have low blood pressure? What's more important is that we help the body adapt, right? And so that's something that we can say. Don't forget also that, you know, if we think about the impact on the sympathetic nervous system, like what happens when we're stressed, right? So when stress levels increase, cortisol increases. When cortisol increases, that really is the first step in creating chronic inflammation in the body that leads to diseases like cancer, heart disease, diabetes. So we know that if you get adjusted, that has a positive impact on your sympathetic nervous system. We decrease sympathetic output. That starts to decrease some of those stress hormones. Stress hormones suppress immunity. So there you can see there's that whole circle that happens. And yeah, I mean, does that
Yeah.
do it for you?
One of the, always when I'm talking to people, obviously, especially skeptics, but even when I'm talking to people that are with me, I always feel more confident if I have the research article in my back pocket, that I'm actually sitting on it, I've read it, I've underlined the parts that are critical, and I know, and I have great respect for this, I know that you put a thing together, I don't know business, but you put a thing together to make that kind of information available to chiropractors and to students. How could they get in touch with that? Because, we hear about all this research, and then you have to wind up going hunt it down yourself, if you can even hunt it down at all. And when you've got people like yourself and Dan Murphy and other people who spend their lives, I mean, their days, day in and day out, looking through all this research, taking the pertinent research out, it's so much easier just to tap into your knowledge base. How do we get in touch with you to do that?
Oh, thanks, Guy. So Dr. Mo Knows is a program that I run that is a live interactive science program that's really focused on getting chiropractors a deeper understanding of the science. Because we know that when you have a deeper understanding, you can have a much more meaningful conversation. And drmoknows.com will get you in touch with me and get you in the program if you're interested, or, we can have a chat for sure.
Spell it out.
drmoknows.com.
Okay.
And if people want to reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, you can find me, Dr. Monique Andrews, and reach out to me, follow me on social media, and we'll get you to the right place.
Thanks for all you do. I'm always like a proud father to have known that I had some little piece, in your education. So thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Guy.
All right. Thanks, Monique. So hoping that you'll tap into Monique's seminars. If you want to get in touch with Dr. Bernsen, we will make sure that you have that kind of information. They're always looking for students with the right philosophical and clinical skill set to come into their organizations. And their goal is, I think, to create hundreds and hundreds of chiropractic offices telling the story. Just in wrapping up, a couple of comments. I made a comment at the beginning that I have a feeling I know where we need to go. If we're not going to hunker down and we're going to create something unique, what does that look like? When we come out of this initial intensive care stuff and we get into the corrective care, the wellness care for our healthcare systems, what's that going to look like? A couple more statistics just to frame this. The United States with men, there are 777 deaths per year per 100,000 men. Women are 433,000 deaths per women per year. What's really interesting is research has shown that with men who are unemployed, the death rate among men goes up 2.54% because of unemployment. I think at some point in the not too distant future, and I'm already seeing articles in the New York Times and the Washington Post talking about the impact of what's going on with coronavirus and the impact it's the economy and the collapse of our economy is having on people's lives. And I think while they might be referring to some of that on an emotional and financial level, the bottom line is being unemployed kills. And so we need to start putting some perspective to the things that we're doing. And I just want to make a comment. I wrote this the other night in the middle of the night when I was awake. And it said this: while the cultural norms are being challenged, the one thing that doesn't change is the need to be together, to build relationships, to find friends and love, to be safe and secure and recognized and acknowledged. And whoever finds new ways of doing these things will make millions, billions of dollars. I want to go back to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Facebook. You know, what they did was they gave us a way to accomplish what I just read, a way for us to find each other, to be together, a way to hook up with people that had similar interests, no matter where they were in the world, and build a tribe of people that had a collective interest and ideas. We know, for example, that computers, personal computers, gave us access to the world. It wasn't just that it was a great technology idea. What they answered were issues having to do with relationships, having to do with ways of people being able to find each other. Look at everything from eHarmony to the other dating and marital websites. The number of people that are finding each other in these ways, where before you had to hopefully meet someone at your church or your synagogue or in a bar or at school, and maybe out of that small number of people, find a person that you wanted to love and live your life with. And today, how that's allowed us to expand. And so people in return to Jobs and Gates and Zuckerberg at Facebook gave them billions of dollars because they helped them find a way to connect, to build relationships, to find love, to find friendship, and to find things that commonly we share together. I think that if we can find a way in chiropractic to create those kinds of relationships, to help people bond together, not isolate themselves, that in fact there are opportunities where we'll see millionaires, billionaires being made because of this disruptive time in the course of human history. So on one hand, while we see all this drama and chaos and separation going on, it's only heightening what we need to do. And what chiropractic at its core, as a vitalistic philosophy says, is that we're all connected, we're all part of each other, and we just need to find ways to build those relationships as we move into the future. We'll talk more as things come about, actual technologies that allow us to do that, to move forward and to create these kinds of relationships. But my expectation is it's a great time to be a chiropractor, as Dr. Bernsen said, and as we come out of this chaos, never a better time to be outrageously successful in chiropractic and to take our profession to a new leadership role in the coming healthcare system. Dr. LaMarche, thank you for the time today. I appreciate all the work that you do. I know you're there on the campus in the trenches, holding things together, and you're such a great ambassador for the college and such I've always been jealous of your ability just naturally to connect with people and bring them together. So thanks for bringing us all together today. And I'll see you all back on campus as soon as we get through this initial intensive care stuff.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bernsen, Dr. Andrews, and Dr. Riekeman for sharing your insights and expertise to keep our students inspired about their career in chiropractic. And students know Dr. Andrews was on campus a few months ago, and we look forward to hosting her at some point on campus. For those of you who attend Career Fair, Chiro One Wellness Centers always has a presence at Career Fair. So if you want to know more about Chiro One Wellness Centers, that would be a time. I know that this quarter, we're probably going to be online and virtual most of the quarter, if not the entire quarter. But there is a plan to actually host a Career Fair online. And if not, as soon as you're back on campus, we'll certainly have these opportunities available for you. And so again, Dr. Andrews, Dr. Riekeman, Dr. Bernsen, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing this fantastic 50 minutes with our students. And students, be ready for week 4 assembly, which will also be online, where we'll be hosting Dr. James Chestnut. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us from wherever you joined. I know, Dr. Andrews, you were up super early. You're come to us from Victoria, British Columbia, so 3 hours before our time here, and Dr. Bernsen in Chicago, and of course, Dr. Riekeman from Puerto Rico. Blessings to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us.